Jim, do we have viewers that view any of this online? Or do you have any numbers?
For what?
Well, we go to some links to broadcast the meeting. Is there anybody watching?
Yeah, 12 of us.
Okay, there we go.
I don't know. I'll find out for you, Randy.
We're live on
Yeah,
YouTube.
we can get
so-
the metrics on it.
Yeah.
We haven't checked for a while, but I'm gonna guess they're way down.
Yeah.
This is Emily. The last meeting we had, I think at least 4 people watching live because it said there were like 12 people viewing on YouTube at that point. And I know there were a bunch of us, logged in on different computers making sure YouTube was working. But so we had a few.
Oh,
I
good.
think Pamela was one of them, though.
All right. Are we
How many
ready?
internal versus external is hard to tell.
Are we ready,
Time.
Laura?
Let's see. So we are live on YouTube. Let me make sure check on the website here. Another minute on the website. Sorry, I should have done the streaming a few minutes earlier.
I guess we should start this part 5 minutes early.
There we go. We are now live on the website as well. We are good to go to start.
Okay.
Terrific. All right. It's now 6:32. I'll call to order the May 5th, 2020 meeting of Cherry Hills Village City Council to order. According to city regulations and the city manager's disaster declaration and the Tri-County Health Department stay-at-home order, we are conducting this meeting virtually. Could the city clerk please read the welcome slide?
So welcome to the meeting, everybody. We are live streaming and recording. Everyone, well, doesn't matter that you're automatically muted. You are all unmuted or muted as you choose. We do not have any honest participation signed up tonight. Reminder for council that all votes will be by roll call. If anyone has any technical difficulties, Emily is standing by to help as much as she can.
Okay, let's have a roll call then, Laura.
Councillor Safavi?
Here.
Councillor Wheel?
Here.
Councillor Brown?
Here.
Councillor Gallagher?
Here.
Councillor Sheldon?
Here.
Councillor Blum?
Here.
So we have full attendance tonight. Here, now we could pass over the audience participation because no one has emailed us to sign up, and we will pass over the reports from the boards and city commissions for the same reason. We're on to agenda item 5. And I guess my first question is, anyone want to remove anything from the consent agenda? Hearing none.
Then I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items 5A through E. Can we have a roll call, Laura?
Counselor Safavi,
Yes.
Counselor Wheel,
Yes?
Counselor Brown,
Yes.
Counselor Gallagher,
Yes.
Counselor Sheldon,
Yes.
Counselor Blum.
Yes.
Next up then will be agenda item 7A, which is unfinished business, Council Bill 4, Series 2020, amending Section 16410 of the Municipal Code concerning off-street parking. And this is on second reading, and it was continued from April 7th. And I think Director Kramer, will you be presenting?
Mr. Mayor, I will. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This is the second and final reading for this item. Just as a refresher about the topic, this emerged from the Code Modernization Project as a way to end confusion about the amount of parking required related to various land uses that have multiple aspects to them. And so the section of the code in question is the lead in to the entire parking requirements section. And so it just attempts to clarify that the multiple land uses are what are added together, not individual parts of a single land use. Staff looked at other jurisdictions and found a similar way to calculate that, and as well as consulting with Todd Messenger, the lead consultant on the Code Modernization Project. So staff and planning and zoning both recommended approval of the text change that is in your staff report. Staff is available for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Chris, appreciate it. Let's go one by one, and Councilor Blum.
Chris, if you could clarify for me, because I know we've had this discussion before, does this change any of the parking requirements, or do the applicant, would they have to come in for a variance if that was the case?
So the parking ratios will not change. If you recall, during the Code Modernization Project, one representative from a church requested that the ratio for places of assembly be changed. That was not acted upon. This text amendment tonight just attempts to clarify how that gets calculated. That's all it's attempting to do. It is not changing the parking ratio itself. So whether or not an individual applicant would need a variance would really depend upon what their individual proposal was. Were they attempting to construct new square footage, reduce square footage, et cetera?
Thank you.
Councilor Sheldon.
I'd like to thank staff for taking some time with me last week to go through this. As you all know, I've had some concerns over these changes over the last few months, and I've now gotten comfortable with the way this is written, and I appreciate you're all being patient with me at the last meeting, and I appreciate our public who is concerned about this particular matter being patient with me as well. So I think I'm generally comfortable now with the language as proposed, and I will be voting yes tonight for this. Thank you.
Councilor Gallagher.
No questions.
Councilor Brown.
I just had one comment. I wanted to make very clear for the record that this is not in response to any individual request, any single organization or entity in the village. Definitely, at least from my perspective and the way it came forward, this is about clarifying our code as it stands today and being more clear as to how we actually would calculate it if somebody walked in the door already. So it's actually not even as much of a change as it is just codifying what we actually do today. And so I want to be real clear about that. I know that there has been some interweaving between potential requests and this and that. And for me, it's not about any of that. It's just about being clear about, how we treat everyone in the village fairly and equitably.
Good point.
Councilor Wheel.
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Mayor. Just one question, Chris. the language does it apply universally across? It seemed like we're focused on places of assembly, and that's fine. Does it have any impacts beyond places of assembly?
Yes, there are a couple of land uses where it's a single land use, but it has multiple parts that do need to be calculated and added up. Those will remain the same. An example of that would be a private club. It lays out the individual uses. Another one would be schools. There's some other examples though on the flip side, like places of assembly, where it just lists the main use and doesn't go on to list the other ones. I think the other one is service station is another example. It just requires parking for each gas pump, not for office space or retail space. That would be another example where this would apply.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Councilor Safavi?
No questions.
Okay, I'd like to just join in Councilor Brown's comments too, that this came about through the code modernization process as identification of just an ambiguity that needs to be resolved. So I agree with Councilor Brown's statements as well. Given that, if there are no more comments, what's the council's pleasure? I could entertain a motion.
I move to approve Council Bill 4, Series 2020, amending Section 16-4-10 of the Municipal Code concerning off-street parking requirements on second and final reading.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Laura, could you take a roll call?
Counselor Safavi?
Yes, approved.
Counselor Wheel?
Yes.
Counselor Brown?
Yes.
Counselor Gallagher?
Yes.
Counselor Sheldon?
Yes.
Counselor Blum?
Yes.
Okay, that resolution 13 series 20. Yeah, Council Bill 4 series 2020 is approved unanimously. Thank you, everyone. The next order of business is agenda item 8A, which is resolution 13 series 2020, approving the second amendment to the agreement to urban drainage and flood control district regarding Greenwood Gulch. And I think Director Goldie, and my first question, Director Goldie, is it still urban drainage or?
You know, they are still urban drainage doing business as the Mile High Flood District.
Okay.
So they're officially still urban drainage.
Very good. I'll let you go ahead, Director Goldie. You can make the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Before you tonight, you have the second amendment to the agreement with urban drainage for the Mile High Flood District for the construction work being done on Greenwood Gulch for the John Meade Park improvements. The original agreement was $100,000 for design. The First Amendment was $100,000 for construction. The Second Amendment is another $100,000 to help out with the construction costs. We had a $100,000 grant or project, which is only a partial. The project was at 1800 East Tufts and involved a private landowner there as well as the Tufts footbridge. That started in 2012. We were never able to come to a full agreement with the landowner there. The landowner actually had to do the work in an emergency situation a few years ago during a flood situation, and staff in-house did the work to secure the footing for the footbridge. So we asked Urban Drainage to take this money and flop it into the John Meade Park project, and they were happy to do that. So I can answer any questions that there might be.
Good. Thank you, Director Goldie. Councilor Blum.
No questions.
Councilor Sheldon.
Yeah, just one thing. Jay, have you or will you be, as a result of tonight's vote, if this passes, will you be contacting that homeowner at 1800 East Tufts and notifying them that this money has now been moved elsewhere to another city project?
I can. This money has been sitting dormant, like I said, since about 2014. The project started in 12. Their work is all done. They did it outside of the grant between urban drainage and the city. So this money was actually never put into that project because they never put their money in. So the money was never really theirs.
Thank you.
Councilor Gallagher.
Jay, this homeowner, so did this homeowner fund that work during that emergency situation?
Yes.
And why did they not try and connect with these funds?
Well, we have, this is a great fund, but for some reason, everybody that owns property on the creek believes that the city and urban drainage should completely pay for all of the work being done. So they wanted to try to get more where it's a 50-50 match between urban drainage and the property owner, because the city has a policy not to spend our public funds on private property. The other issue that comes up is there needs to be a permanent easement, and a lot of people have an issue giving up a permanent drainage easement on their property. So in the time that I've been with the city, we've probably had a half dozen of these where people will request funds, and then when they find out the actual cost for the work and the easements they have to give up, they're not as willing to accept these funds.
So this homeowner, they funded it themselves, they didn't give up, and as a result, they did not have to give up any easements.
Correct.
Just curious, do we know what that cost?
No, we don't know. Urban Drainage estimate for the entire project was real close to $500,000. I don't know what their portion that they had to repair was.
To repair the footings or to shore up the footings on the bridge. Again, who funded that?
We funded that. We did that in-house.
And who did the actual work?
It was done in-house.
I see.
And we were able to save a lot of money doing it in-house and not hiring a contractor, getting the materials ourselves and installing those ourselves.
Yeah, just a comment, it looks great.
Thank you.
Councilor Brown?
And,
No, I'm sorry.
I don't have any comments, but wow, thanks. That really helps, and went from 100,000 to 300,000 for the project overall. That's just great news. So thank you for doing that.
Councilor Neal.
Yep, thank you. I'm kind of in the same place when somebody wants to give us $100,000, and of course, you guys worked hard to get it, all the applications, but not a lot of questions about that. And I read through it. It doesn't look like it comes with a whole lot of strings attached. So well done.
Thank you.
Councilor Safavi?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. I can add a little bit of information about this. Greenwood Village actually pays the other half of this. So when they were doing Little Dry Creek through Greenwood Village, they came in and the city and urban drainage picked up the entire tab. Maybe that's where people are getting the idea that it would be free. There's still work to be done along Little Dry Creek that urban drainage, I think, wants to complete, and trying to find the money or the easements is a challenge. I think also that Arapahoe County has some money in their funds that through OSTAB that may be available for this. So it's a future endeavor to talk to some of those property owners. If you've been down there and seen it, there's still a lot of erosion that's going on in Little Dry Creek, and urban drainage is interested in fixing that and fixing the banks of the Little Dry Creek. So anyway, but I agree with everybody's comments that $100,000, this is terrific. I always say, let's see how fast we can sign this and get them up.
On that note, I move to approve Resolution 13, Series 2020, approving a second amendment to the agreement with Urban Drainage and Flood Control District regarding final design, right-of-way acquisition, and construction of drainage and flood control improvements for Greenwood Gulch at Quincy Avenue.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. If there's no further discussion, I'll have Laura take a roll call.
Counselor Safavi?
Yes.
Counselor Wheel?
Yes.
Counselor Brown?
Yes.
Counselor Gallagher?
Yes.
Counselor Sheldon?
Yes.
Counselor Blum?
Yes.
And that passes unanimously. And Laura, do you want, I can come down to sign, we can talk offline about it. I can come down to sign that whenever you can have available.
Now.
We should. I don't know how we can handle signatures now, but we'll have to figure something out.
We'll figure it out.
DocuSign.
Yeah. Actually, I think I might have a signature stamp. Anyway, for you. Unless there's more, I have some brief mayor's reports, mayor report. First, there was a letter from a draft letter from the county commissioners that was to Tri-County Health and Dr. Douglas that I had Jim send out to you. That has become moot already. Things move so fast because Dr. Douglas announced today that they will be opening Safer at Home effective Saturday. He was on a call, and I know that Councilor Gallagher was on the call as well. He also talked about the mask issue and the way that's going. The concern there about it was making mandatory, making criminal, a criminal violation of the mask, of not wearing a mask, coming from an unelected director of the health department, made some people nervous. And that was a lot of the resistance to that. And that's why the county commissioners wanted to have a voice in it. I think there's a good, what I heard today was a suggestion that either there'll be no mandatory, or if there is, it'll be an opt-in for municipalities. So if they want to have a mandatory, they'll have guidelines from Tri-County Health. It's likely that Aurora would go that way because our city council has voted to have a mandatory. So I think that solves the problem, because then the cities who want to impose those kinds of ordinance and rules on, criminal rules for non-compliance would actually be voting on it, and it wouldn't be coming directly from Dr. Douglas, who I think was uneasy with that anyway. So that is over. I'm not sure even if the letter went out. If you want, actually, Dr. Douglas said that they were having a meeting tomorrow with his board to finally decide whether they're going to have mandatory, opt-out, or nothing. So we should know more tomorrow. And they have a call on Friday as well. So, let's see. We had some of our citizens. Dr. Harwood has raised, and Jim Harwood, who's a retired surgeon at Swedish, contacted us, and Al can talk more about it, about the problem the food banks are having right now with huge demand from underemployed and unemployed people needing food and their needs. So he's come forward and wants to do something, and so we've been talking to him, and I'll let Al talk about that. A little bit on Quincy Farm. We had I think that master plan is underway, but clearly that's going to be delayed, I think, because they haven't had a chance for public input, and and that's understandable completely. So I think we need to let them know that we're not I think we told them June. That's just not going to happen with the way things have been going. So I think my sense is that everything, the larger master plan as well, is going to be delayed. I expect that's understandable given where we are now, and we can't we can't really do the master plans without public input, and that's the problem. We can't really have good public input through Zoom. So I'll reach out to the chairman of the Quincy Farm Committee too. The other thing about Quincy Farm, I just had a letter, and I haven't seen it yet, but I'm told we have a letter, Jim, to the tenant, which is John Brown, right? Candy's brother, sent terminating the lease. He wants to terminate, he's going to terminate the lease effective June 30th. Because
Okay.
they're insured.
I have not received that yet, but
I think it's probably sitting in our mailboxes, probably at City Hall. So I just heard about that. We need to check. But so that would be, it'd be a month earlier than we thought. And he's doing it, I think, because of the insurance issues. They didn't want to pay for insurance after June 30th, and that's when it ended. So that's going to be we'll bump up a little bit of when we thought the tenant would be off the property on Candy's place. They'd still express an interest in coming back someday after the, orders or public health orders allow them to come back and do a memorial for Candy on the property. I said, yeah, it sounds absolutely reasonable. We can accommodate that. I think that's it. I think I mentioned too that, future meetings we have to do by Zoom, and I've talked to other mayors and and they're all Zooming now. I think the ambivalence is when they have a public hearing that really needs public involvement, what to do. I mean, because if it's a big development plan or something, they don't want to do that by Zoom, and they can't really effectively do it. So they're struggling with how they're going to do that. Fortunately, we don't have that yet, but hopefully we'll be out of these orders before we have anything that really would require a big public hearing. But everybody agrees that the big problem is the 10-person limit on meetings. So until that's changed, it's hard to conceive how we can have a real meeting back in City Hall. But we'll see what they think, what comes of that. That's it for me. Other reports, Councilor Blum?
Yeah, as the mayor talked about, Jim Harwood contacted Mike Gallagher first, then contacted me, and then contacted the mayor and wrote a thesis on the food bank and what we need to do as a city. After discussions with the mayor, Mike Gallagher and some other people, the mayor gave him some direction as to what he could do as far as raising funds for these food banks. His comment, and I think it was very well said, he said, we're sitting in the middle of a affluent community between us and Greenwood Village, and we have these other people who are starving basically and want to know what he could do. So, and after the mayor talked to him, apparently, really there's nothing we can do as a contribution or even have employees, because that becomes an in-kind contribution. So the mayor drafted a resolution, and I guess we would have to introduce this at the next meeting, basically saying, and it was put in form by Laura, and basically saying that we support any village resident for any efforts to provide food security for those affected by the pandemic. I think it's a great resolution. I think it'll come up, I guess I'll put on the agenda for the next meeting and approve it. And I think to show support for these people within the community who want to do this work, I think is a good idea. The second thing I had was, and I discussed this, and I think that Jessica will talk about this today, is apparently we get some FEMA funds. They've been allocated to Arapahoe County. And the big discussion, and Jessica can bring us up to date on it, is how those funds are allocated. And Jessica can talk about that. But I think there's a potential there of recovering whatever it is as a reimbursement under the FEMA awarding to Arapahoe County. So I guess she will talk about that. Other than that, I hope everybody stays healthy.
Thank you, Councilor Sheldon.
Not so much a report. I have a quick question for Director Kramer. In the community development project activity list, you show the Cherry Hills Country Club as an active applicant for a floodplain variance. Are they the applicant there because they're the property owner? Because I would think that typically the applicant would be the contract purchaser, person who's trying to buy that property. And maybe we can take this offline if it's more than just a moment's response. But other than that, I don't have any other report. Chris?
I can answer that now if you'd like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Cherry Hills Country Club he's the property owner, but you're right. There is a Mr. Junt, John Junt, who is the one seeking the variance itself. And I probably could put both of those pieces of information in that report. But yeah, the country club is not seeking the variance itself, like explicitly, or the lead. They have given authority to Mr. Junt to seek that variance.
I guess then maybe what I'm going to ask of our city attorney is, who is the ex parte communication? Who are we ex parte with?
Anyone, just like on any application. I mean, you just can't discuss anything that's coming before you, no matter who is seeking to have that conversation.
Okay, so if I'm talking to a board member at the country club and they bring this up to me, that is off limit discussion.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
I was just shocked to see that they were the actual applicant on this application, considering it's a private citizen that's trying to bring in, or maybe not a citizen, but a
Developer.
Property owner or contract purchaser trying to bring that in. Thank you. I think that clarifies. And I didn't have much to report on, so I'm going to skip. Thank you.
Councilor Gallagher.
Jim, when you're giving your report, would you just make some comments, or maybe you want to do it right now, regarding thoughts on putting a tenant in on the east side of Quincy Farm?
Okay, I'll do that during my reports.
Okay, no other report.
Councilor Brown.
I only have one thing to report, and Chief, since you're on the call, it's timely. I have received a few, I guess I would call them more comments rather than complaints. I know that speeding, now that traffic is down, speeding is a problem all over the city in all kinds of ways. And Dahlia and Mansfield have surfaced, and people have asked for some additional patrolling. I know I've seen a couple of police cars. I don't know if they're patrolling or just on their way somewhere. I'm not sure. Maybe you're already doing that, but I just wanted to pass that along.
And Chief, if you're trying to respond, you're muted. I don't know if you're trying to respond, but if you are, you need to unmute.
There you go.
So now I'm unmuted.
You are unmuted.
Okay. That wasn't on my end, just FYI. Anyway, so thank you, ma'am. Yes, we have been out and about. In fact, I can tell you all that the traffic team did some spring training going over all of their policies, and we have started to deploy the motorcycles as of this week. So even prior to that, though, we have been doing traffic, whether it's on Bellevue or University. They are out there working it. And again, we're, it's difficult to be there all the time, but we have started to deploy the speed trailer too. So I can work to get that up there, Ms. Brown. So I appreciate you letting me know, and I'll pass that location along to the troops.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Not much news in the neighborhood. Dr. Cog, for those of you who weren't aware but have had interactions with Dr. Cog, there was a lady named Connie Garcia who was basically Doug Rex, the executive director, his right-hand person. And she sort of disappeared from the scene early in the year, and he sent out a note that she had passed away. April 30. So I wanted to make you aware of that. Cancer, not COVID, by the way. I've been appointed to the Performance and Engagement Committee at Dr. Cog. There are some funding opportunities. And what I think, rather than spend time on this call, maybe spend some time with both mayor and city manager and kind of share with you and see if there's any potential for projects that we might have to qualify for some funds. That's all I have.
Councilor Savabi?
Yes, actually, no report, Mayor, but I do want to make a statement here. I want to make sure that we recognize and we say thank you to, all the doctors, nurses, policemen and women, and firemen and women in our community, all the first responders, again, and everybody that are keeping the grocery stores open. So a lot of people in our community that I think need to be recognized for staying open. And while a lot of people are quarantined at home, they are basically out there trying to make sure that the basics are met. Also want to state that although our village does not have any biotech or pharmaceutical industry really, but we're affected by thousands of the pharma biotech folks and then diagnostic people that are working on the vaccines, that they are working on the therapeutics, as well as a lot of these diagnostic kits that some are out there and some are still being worked on, both in US and overseas. So I just want to make sure that, again, as some of us are staying at home, that we also recognize and say thank you to a lot of these folks. That's all, Mayor.
Thank you. That's very appropriate. Okay, Jim?
Yes. First of all, good evening, council, mayor. Happy Cinco de Mayo. Hope everybody's enjoying it. Two out here in Douglas County, they're opening up slowly, and it was nice to finally get a haircut after about 2.5 months. So I'm about 5 pounds lighter. But what I would like to do is what we did at the last meeting and go around first to all the department heads and let them give a briefing on some of the activity going on in the city and what's been happening, especially in light of COVID-19. And I think I'll start off with Chief Tobria, if you would chime in here first.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it. So, Mayor and City Council, good evening. One of the things I did want to talk about tonight, which we've just discussed a little bit, was getting the motorcycles out. And in addition to them coming out, I think we finally have all the bugs taken care of with the e-citation. So the handheld devices that you would basically swipe to populate information in a summons, they are out there using those. So really looking forward to seeing how that assists people. We're still trying to figure out a couple of logistic bugs, how do you carry them on the motorcycles and so forth, but you will see that out there, which is a good thing. Unfortunately, I have to report to you that back on April 23rd, and you'll get this in my monthly report, we did have a rash of mailbox thefts and a couple of trespasses along the area of Mockingbird, Quincy Lane and Downing, down in that area. It was probably all done at the same time, and we're still working those cases, but you could please ask your constituents to, pick up your mail every day, get locking mailboxes if you can. Now, I will tell you that some of these mailboxes were the locking type, and they were pried. And then over in that neighborhood too, we had a stolen vehicle. So we're working on those. We haven't had anything since. We have used social media to get the word out about mail probably because of stimulus checks. People are going to be out there doing those types of things with regard to mail. Even the U.S. Postal Service has set something out. So just an FYI there. With regard to some patrolling that we've been doing, we've been out very visible on the trails. We've deployed bicycles out there. We've had officers walking the trails. I personally have gone out a couple of times on the trails. We are really been met with, I'd say 98% positive comments for us to be seen out there. We will continue to do that. The trailheads are obviously very crowded, so we're trying to make sure we provide extra patrol there. Our new officer, Nicole Trancoso, started her training on Monday, the 20th of April. She's doing very well so far. We're really excited to have her on board. She comes with previous experience from the Department of Corrections, and then most recently 2 years down at the Colorado Springs Police Department. So we've got her in training, which is a great thing. And then lastly, just kind of a little anniversary note. On the 30th of April was my 8th year as your police chief. And I'm still having a great time. I'm very proud of our police department, and we certainly appreciate all of your support. So thank you.
Congratulations on the anniversary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'd have a cake for you if we were all there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Made you
Maybe
one,
later.
but she ate it.
Maybe City Attorney Guckenberg has some extra left over from her birthday.
We all need to share some cake for all of our
Thank you.
special
Last
events.
thing I need. The last thing I need is to eat cake.
We can walk and then have cake. How about that?
Thank you, Chief. Much appreciate your report. Director Goldie, if you would.
Yes, good evening. So I met with my staff today. We're putting together some protocols, so we'll go back to normal shifts. Next week, we had them on staggered shifts so we could keep one person in each vehicle. We will go back to our regular shifts next week with our protocols in place. We've had a few requests for speeding issues throughout the city. Unfortunately, we can't really do any traffic counts right now without school being in and with less people going to work. So if you hear from residents that think they have traffic issues, have them contact me, but it's going to be a while before we can deploy our traffic counters out there and get some numbers that mean anything to us. Work continues on the park at John Meade and Allen Hutto. They're currently putting in irrigation. The boardwalk is complete. They're working on the splash area that goes through the wetlands. And so it's really starting to come together over there, a lot slower than we would like, but with the situation that it is, we're just happy to have people out there working. That's all I have.
Thank you. Director Kramer.
He's
Unmute
muted.
yourself.
You're still muted.
Sorry.
There you go.
Is that better? Good evening. I do have a few updates for you tonight, starting with building permit. As council is aware, we are still taking, reviewing, and issuing and inspecting permits. I will tell you overall in April, our permit numbers, just on a volume perspective, were down. Excuse me. The good news is that our new home permits continue to happen, which from a revenue perspective on building permits is really helpful. And so, you know, overall, I think our total revenue year to date from 2020 compared to year to date 2019 is down about 20%. And again, we've been holding neighborhood input meetings, which are required prior to submittal of a new home permit. We're able to host those electronically. And I think we have 5 scheduled right now, which means that we're close to receiving 5 new applications for new homes. So that's very encouraging.
Wow.
As far as development review goes, we have received in the last few weeks a number of cases. The 3727 South Ogden that we discussed with Councilor Sheldon. The Cherry Hills Country Club has also submitted two other permits for review. One is a floodplain variance for some channel improvements for portions of the Little Dry Creek that run through the golf course. Further, they have also submitted a site plan for the $55 million renovation of the southern portion of their clubhouse that just came in. And finally, we also, and I think I sent an email to council, we got the Crown Castle request to relocate the cell tower from the park to the city-owned parcel in the northwest quadrant of University in Quincy. So quite a bit of development review has come in the door recently. So stay tuned for that. Overall, I think, we have really tried to make it so that apart from not being able to come to the counter, we've tried to provide every service that we could, just like normal times. Predictably, some of the willingness from folks to, have a big capital outlay is, I'm sure a little people are waiting to see what happens a little bit before they submit. So we did see a slowdown, but I'm really proud of our ability to still basically process everything, including neighborhood input meetings, for all systems go. The only other thing I have is that planning and zoning is meeting next week virtually, a Zoom meeting, just to begin kicking around some ideas for mail survey questions and topics. They are not taking action. They are not voting. I think they're also intending to have the Citizens Advisory Task Force provide feedback on that as well, but they thought they could, start making some, planting some seeds on that next week. So we are gonna have a study session on that topic. Other than that, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Director Sager.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. As Councilor Blum said, Arapahoe County will be receiving funds from FEMA to assist with COVID-19 recovery operations. It was confirmed today that the county will be able to pass some of those funds down to municipalities located within the county, but the distribution of the funds and the amount the city will receive has yet to be determined. It sounds like the general consensus is for Arapahoe County to keep 55% of those funds and then disseminate the remaining 45% based on population, but again, that hasn't been decided yet. So Arapahoe County's finance director is holding a virtual meeting tomorrow, and I'm hoping we can get a better idea of what that will look like for the city tomorrow.
So we get like $5. We get $5.
Hopefully not $5. It looks like from the models that they've put out, it's anywhere from 1,000 up to 1 million. So it's a really big gap. So we'll see what that looks like more for us. But the reports from the Treasury indicate the funds can be used to reimburse the city for personal protection equipment expenditures that we've already made, help local businesses recover from the pandemic, or assist residents with things like food deliveries or mortgage assistance programs. It is likely going to be a reimbursement program since the county is still required to document the expenditures of funds, so we'll have to ask for the reimbursement. So spend the money ahead of time, get the money afterwards. But once I have that meeting, I'll put together a summary for this week's weekly update so you have an idea of what that looks like for us. The city is also eligible to receive reimbursement funds from FEMA directly. So in preparation of requesting FEMA funds, I've contacted FEMA to create an account, and the city has also been provided a COVID-19 Pandemic Public Assistance Grant POC that will help us, will assist us in applying for that reimbursement. So we have to go through that person to receive the funds. They do have a minimum threshold, which we haven't met at this time, so we'll have to wait until we do meet that minimum before we apply for reimbursement. And so far we've spent money on things like masks, gloves, sanitizer, those types of things. So we can get reimbursed for those. We just have to wait until we hit their minimum threshold. As far as revenue goes, sales tax collections for March remained consistent, and it was actually up 6% from where we were this time last year. However, use tax, building permit fees, and municipal court fines were down. So overall in those four categories, we were about 3% short of where we were this time last year. But we continue to keep a close eye on expenditures so we can help offset the loss in revenue. And even though I expect May sales tax collections to decrease with the businesses offering limited services, as Director Kramer mentioned, we do have we have some larger permits on the horizon, so we should exceed the building permit fees increase. The only other thing I have to report is as we prepare to return to City Hall next week, HR analyst Catherine Ducharme and I went through the checklist that we received from Tri-County Health today to make sure that the city is in compliance with that checklist when everyone returns back to the office next week. And that's all I have.
Great. Any questions so far? Okay, as
No,
mentioned,
the only
I'll
thing
just-
is the
Yes.
checklist. Can you, I'm sorry, Jim, the checklist, can you share that with us? I want to see what that checklist is.
Sure.
Of course.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll send you the link.
Thanks.
It's about a 4-page checklist of items they'd like to see. So staff has been busy accomplishing those checklist items this week, and we'll be ready. We're planning to have all of city staff back at work on Monday. We're going to open up the doors. I don't expect to see a ton of people coming in through the doors, as a lot of them have learned to be able to deal with their business through telephone and through the computer. So, but we're prepared to have whoever does come in, we will have masks available. We will make it mandatory inside the building to wear a mask. We'll have sanitizer available if somebody would like to use that. We've also established how we're going to handle court. This first meeting in May, we've canceled the court, and again, offering plea bargains to many of those traffic issues that have been ticketed. And we're planning to have a late May meeting in the courtroom. And we've established that no more than 10 individuals will be in the courtroom at any given time. They will have masks. The prosecuting attorney will have 3 individuals that he will be talking to, and 2 of them will be waiting in line and 1 in the prosecuting attorney's office. We are getting a couple of screens that will be in front of the prosecuting attorney as well as the court clerk to help with anything that may arise. And again, we always urge anybody who's sick not to come into City Hall at all. And in the event that somebody appears sick, we will send them home and out of the City Hall building. With that, I know Councilmember Gallagher asked about Quincy Farms and the eastern side. At this time, we have no intention of putting another tenant in there. I think it would be best to wait till the Quincy Farm master plan is completed and identify what should happen on that side. I would anticipate, at least for the short time, several months, I'll say, is that place will remain empty. And I know, as the mayor alluded to, the brother of the tenant will be working to clean out any personal belongings out of that place. So we're still, staff has been dealing with the brother, and things are going quite well. And other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions if you have about city operations coming next week.
Jim, it's more of a comment and a slash question, and I don't necessarily need expect you to have an answer today, but I think it's something we need to discuss. If we believe that over the next 12 to 24 months, somewhere about 60 to 70% of population will get sick with COVID. So this means that somewhere about 2/3 of our staff, city staff, will get it at some point. And if it's from the time they get it until they recover, there's another 2 weeks that they have to stay away from other people in quarantine. I want you to think about this maybe next time. We can have a discussion as what is the plan procedure we need to put in place. That's one. For example, if all of a sudden we do have 10, 12 of our police officers get sick, or if we have, God forbid, most of them get sick and they're basically out for 3-4 weeks, what are we going to do? That's one. The second thing here is that we have a relatively small number of staff members in our city, and I don't want to make a recommendation, but it's something I want us to think about, that at some point, I think it is worth it that, we do have an antibody test for every one of our employees and see which one of them are immune. At least there is some level of comfort, at least, a percentage of our team members may just be just fine in case if there are issues in the future. Anyway, all the businesses, everybody's thinking about these things. And I think, we also need to think about this for our city staff.
Thank you for that, Councilmember Safavi. And we have had quite a bit of discussion about that, especially for our police department and what happens if several of the officers all at once came down. And I know Michelle and I have had that discussion and talked about where we would be able to recoup and add additional enforcements if we needed to. But at this point in time, we can also require mandatory overtime. And Chief, I know you're unmuted if you want to jump in on that one.
Sure. So within our plan, we had a plan for X amount of officers would go down. We would cancel all of our PTO. The next phase would be that if you lose 5 officers, that we would go to a 12-hour shift plan. And then, as we talked before, we would be backed up by mutual aid from the people within the division that we were assigned from the operation management system that the county had put into place. So we've thought those things through, and right now everything is working fine. And if we would have gone down to those levels or continue as this thing still evolves, we have plans in place to make sure that we have policing in the city. We put in place some service modifications so that the officers are staying safer. The reporting of misdemeanor crimes is done via telephone after we make contact with folks. And we obviously still respond to crimes in progress or felony crimes. So those things are all still in place.
So Chief, that's great. The only thing that I would add is that, I think you need to have some kind of I don't call it a policy, but something in place that as soon as 1 or 2 of the officers, if they're detected to be sick, to do a PCR test for a virus test for every single one of your police officers. Because the chance that if 1 or 2 have got it, that, there's a good chance that maybe the rest of them have it, and they will come up in 2 or 3 weeks. Having that information, I think, would be extremely useful. So my recommendation is, if at any point one of your officers is positive, then do a quick PCR test. Somehow work with the county, with LabCorp or somebody. We need to have a system in place that they will all get tested within 2-3 days. That's all.
Sure. I can work with Ms. Ducharme with regard to that. Probably something I don't know if I brought it up in the last meeting, but the county is still coming to the police building once a week, doing a decon for all our entire building and also all of our patrol cars. So that continues through the month of May. And then we do have policies in place with regard to if one of our officers' family members is ill, what we would do with regard to quarantine. So I think we have the policies in place for everything that you asked about, sir, other than if I do have an officer who does test positive, about getting the rest of the officers tested. And we'll be working on that right away.
Thank you, Chief.
Sure.
Let me know if I can be of any help or service in case if you're discussing any information with them, or just let me know. Thanks.
Appreciate that, Council Member. And that would apply also for the rest of the staff too, as we'll develop a plan if those things happen, and how we go about getting testing done for the rest of the staff. So thank you for that. That concludes my comments.
City Attorney comments.
It's a good day. Your attorney has nothing to say.
I wanted to end on a happy note. During the call today, buried in the bad news was Dr. Douglas saying that the numbers in our hospitals are really good. We've gone down from almost 900 people hospitalized to 650. The number of ventilators, there's more than 60% of the ventilators right now are not being used. And it's actually, the numbers are actually better than they were at this time last year. So there's good news from the hospitals, which is kind of pushing, it was the message being pushed, and it is true. That's really the state has the COVID-19, state site that's really interesting. If you click on that and go to the data, that's really, what they're really looking at is what the hospitals can do here, not the numbers of people is just a function of how many people are tested, but the real numbers they're looking at is the hospitalizations, and they look very good. So, that's good news for everybody. All right, any other comments or motions to adjourn?
Just one comment. Mike Gallagher and I will be interviewing tomorrow, I guess via Zoom, for Parks and Trails.
Right. I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Sounds like a unanimous consent.
Aye.
All right, thanks everybody. Everybody stay well.
Happy Cinco de Mayo. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.